In this video, we are going to look at the very basics of embryology, or the very basics of what occurs after the sperm and the egg come together to make that fertilized zygote. With fertilization, this is the penetration of the oocyte by the spermatozoa. So it includes the union of the two haploid nuclei. The haploid nuclei means the sperm carries 23 chromosomes, or half the chromosomes. The egg carries 23 chromosomes, or half the chromosomes. When they unite, they make a diploid cell called a zygote. Diploid meaning it has the complete chromosome number, or 46. The ovum is viable for 12 to 24 hours after it has been released. The sperm is viable for 24 to 72 hours after it has been released from the male. Sperm primarily swim but are assisted by uterine contractions toward the usual site of fertilization. Out of the 100 million sperm released, usually less than 100 make it to the ovum because of the barriers. Now, the barriers to fertilization are the acidity of the female tract, cervical mucus at the entrance of the cervical canal in the uterus, leukocytes that kill many of the sperm, and then many sperm just run out of energy or go down the wrong tube. So only about 500 to 1,000 reach the oocyte. The sperm must undergo functional changes while in the female tract before they're capable of penetrating the oocyte. On the sperm, at the head of the sperm, is an acrosomal membrane, and this must be weakened before it can release the acrosomal enzyme. It takes about 6 hours for this to occur. The acrosomal enzyme is going to be the enzyme that's going to act on breaking down the barrier around the oocyte. The acrosomal enzymes from hundreds of spermatozoa will digest the passageway right through here, through the corona radiata and the zona pellucida. And as they digest that passageway, the first sperm that enter that passageway and reach the oocyte will be the one that fertilizes the egg. So it's not necessarily, and it's not the first sperm that reach the oocyte that fertilize the egg, the oocyte, but it's the one that gets through after the other sperm's acrosomal enzymes have digested and opened a passageway. Once the passageway has been cleared, the first sperm to contact the membrane is pulled into the oocyte and does the actual fertilization. Once the egg and sperm have come together, it is now a fertilized egg. It's called a zygote. And then the first few cleavages or mitotic cell divisions of the zygote will take place while the zygote is still in the fallopian tube. Fertilization actually happens in the fallopian tube versus the uterus. 4 days after fertilization, the embryo consists of roughly about 50 cells. It's a solid ball, and this is known as the morular stage. Here you can see a diagram of the morular stage, and you can see that it's solid looking, and if we were able to rotate this in 3 dimensions, you would be able to see that it's composed of roughly 50 cells. Next is the gastrula stage. The cluster of cells that gradually form within the cavity of the blastocyte will then start to sort themselves into 2 layers. These will then produce a 3rd layer by a process called cell migration, and this is the gastration stage. Here we have a diagram of the picture with the gastrula stage, and so the first structure that's formed is the stomach. It's a primitive stomach, but it is the first organ that is formed. So the results of gastration is the formation of 3 cell layers known as the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. These 3 layers are referred to as the primary germ layers because all of the organs and tissue of the embryos will form from one of these 3 layers. The ectoderm develops into the hair and nails, the epidermis of the skin, the nervous system, the tooth enamel, and the lining of the nose and the mouth. The mesoderm develops into the skeletal system, the muscles, the excretory system, the circulatory system, and the gonads. While the endoderm develops into the digestive tract, the respiratory system, the liver, and the pancreas. Roughly about 6 to 7 days after fertilization, the blastocyte attaches itself to the walls of the uterus and begins to grow inward into a process known as implantation. During implantation, the outer layers of the cell of the blastocyte produce two important membranes that surround and protect and nourish the developing embryo. These are the amnion and the chorion. By the end of the 3rd week of development, the nervous system has begun to form, and so has the primitive tube that will give rise to the digestive system. Just so you know, the developing embryo needs a supply of nutrients and oxygen. So the blood of the mother and the embryo do not mix. They pass by each other, but they do not mix. They are separated by a thin membrane, and it allows gas exchange and food and waste production to diffuse. The placenta is the embryo's organ of respiration, nourishment, and excretion. The umbilical cord contains 2 arteries and 1 vein, and they connect the fetus to the placenta. This is the neural stage. This is where the central nervous system starts to form. It's going to start to form the brain and the spinal cord. As far as terminology is concerned, embryo is used until the 3rd month of development. From the 3rd month of development until birth, the organism is called a fetus. And so here we have the stages of development, where we go from the ovum to the blastocyst. You have the embryo. We're showing the stages of development. It's a little fuzzy, but you get the idea of how the growth occurs. You're going to have an upcoming lab where you will be calculating the growth of a developing embryo. And to help with that lab, I've got the sizes of the embryo and the fetus, and I've got the stages of development, what's going on, so you can see the structural changes that the embryo is going through. Just a different view, showing you again where we could have defects that occur, where you could have heart defects, where you could have limb defects, deafness and such. So this chart varies from the previous chart. This shows you where you have those high sensitive areas during fetal development and where various conditions could occur. And so you can see the changes that the embryo goes through from week 4 all the way up to week 20. In that diagram, just some significant events that occur. Week 3, the embryo is surrounded by the amniotic fluid. The placenta starts to form. Week 4, the heart beats. Now, it's not to the level of a 4-chambered heart, but the embryo's heart is beating before the mother typically even knows that she's pregnant. It pumps the blood. The limb buds are forming from the placenta. The placenta is forming. It is a living being. Week 6, limb buds develop, digits, the skeleton of the cartilage forms, all the internal organs are produced by week 8. And so by the time the mother is 2 months pregnant, we have a human-like fetus with all the internal organs that have developed. And so as you look at these significant events, realize that from the moment that the oocyte and the sperm come together to make the zygote, we have a living organism created in the image of God. Moving on to months, with month 3, this is typically where we can look at the embryo and we can tell whether it's a male or a female. We're starting to see the eyes and the ears develop. You're starting to see the cartilage develop, the head is very large. Month 4, the mother can feel the fetal movement. Month 5, the internal organs are going to continue to develop. The embryo, the fetus, is going to weigh about a pound. Month 6, weight is about 1.5 pounds. The eyelids begin to open. You're still, all this time, you're feeling the fetus moving. Month 7, 8, and 9, what you're typically seeing is just a lot of weight growth. You're seeing the organs continue to develop, a lot of movement, and just the final stages before the baby is born. And here we've just got one more photograph showing you. Again, if you look at this and all of these pictures, the fetus heartbeat has already begun. Partuition is the term used for childbirth. This consists of 3 stages. The first stage is cervical dilation. This allows for the passage of the baby's head in the body. The amnion usually bursts. This is when they say the woman's water broke. Now, with the cervix dilating, what we're talking about is that the head of the cervix, that opening, is expanding till it reaches 10 centimeters. Also, the uterus is thinning out. That's called ephase. And if you remember the hip bones, the ilium, ischium, and pubis, that pubic symphysis is becoming putty-like so that the hips can widen for childbirth. Now, all of this is occurring because the body is releasing oxytocin. The next stage is labor, where the uterus contracts every 15 minutes or less, and then the baby is born and the umbilical cord is cut. Now, after the baby's born, there will be another uterine contraction and the placenta will be delivered.